He was just a farm kid from the heart of America. Quiet, humble, raised among open fields and the sound of distant rifle shots echoing through the woods. But when the war came, that same boy would become one of the deadliest snipers the Pacific ever saw. His name wasn't carved in marble or shouted in headlines. Yet, for 1 month, his skill with a rifle changed the tide of fear in the jungles of the Philippines. They called him a ghost, a phantom who could strike without warning, and vanish before the echo of his shot faded. In 30 days, he killed 31 Japanese officers, all with the patience, precision, and instincts he learned back home, hunting rabbits on the farm. The story begins far from the chaos of war, in a place where life moved slowly and every meal depended on how good your aim was. He grew up in a small wooden farmhouse surrounded by wheat fields and forest, where his father taught him how to breathe steady, how to track a deer through tall grass, and how to fire without hesitation. His mother always said, "The boy's got the eyes of a hawk." Nobody knew that those same eyes would one day peer through a sniper scope, searching for men in enemy uniforms instead of game in the woods. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, he was barely out of high school. Like so many young men, he didn't hesitate. He left behind the plowed land, the smell of hay, and the quiet evenings on the porch, trading them for mud, sweat, and the unforgiving jungles of the South Pacific. He enlisted not because he loved war, but because he couldn't stand watching others do the fighting while he stayed home. There was a sense of duty, but also something deeper, a test of everything he'd ever learned in the silence of the fields. Training came easy to him. While others struggled to hit distant targets, he seemed almost calm behind the trigger. His instructors noticed it. That stillness before a shot, the slow exhale, the focus. He wasn't fast, but he was precise. "This one doesn't miss," one sergeant said quietly after a session on the range. When sniper school opened its doors, his name was among the first called. It wasn't glory he was after, just a job to do, one he knew he could do better than most. By 1943, he found himself deep in the jungles of the Philippines, hot, wet, and crawling with mosquitoes. The Japanese army had fortified the area, controlling supply routes and pushing American patrols back with brutal efficiency. The officers in charge were ruthless, confident, and smart. They believed no American could survive long in that thick jungle without being detected. They were wrong. The young sniper moved differently. While others fought in squads, he hunted alone, crawling through vines, sinking into mud, blending with the earth itself. His rifle was clean, his patience endless. He could wait hours, sometimes an entire day, without moving an inch. The jungle was his new farm field. Instead of rabbits, he tracked boots and uniforms. Instead of waiting for a deer to step out, he watched for a glint of metal, the edge of an officer's sword, or the shine of binoculars. His first confirmed kill came quietly. A Japanese lieutenant was directing troops near a riverbank. One shot. The sound echoed and then vanished into the jungle's hum. By the time the soldiers turned, there was no sign of where the bullet came from. Just a man lying still in the mud. The Americans advanced that night, cutting through what had seemed like an impenetrable position. Word spread quickly. The Japanese began calling him the Farmer, a mocking nickname that quickly turned into a whisper of fear. They started changing positions more often, wearing different uniforms to hide their ranks. But it didn't matter. He had learned to recognize authority not by stripes or badges, but by posture, by movement, by instinct. He could tell who was giving orders just by how men looked at them. Each kill was methodical, never rushed. He didn't fire at random soldiers. He aimed for leadership, officers, NCOs, men who directed others. It wasn't personal. It was tactical. He understood something many soldiers didn't. Remove the head, and the body collapses. Chaos follows. Morale breaks. In the space of 1 month, he eliminated 31 officers this way. The jungle began to feel haunted. But behind that terrifying reputation was still the same quiet farm kid. When he wasn't on mission, he wrote letters home. Simple ones about the weather, about the food, about how much he missed the open fields and the sound of crickets at night. He never mentioned what he was doing. His family thought he was just a rifleman, maybe a scout. They never knew that in those same weeks, his commanders were using his lone missions to shift the balance of entire operations. He never asked for medals. He didn't talk about the kills. In truth, each one weighed on him. After every mission, he'd sit alone, clean his rifle, and stare into the jungle, silent, motionless. Some said he was praying. Others said he was just listening, waiting for the war to speak back. Whatever it was, it made him different. The younger soldiers admired him, but they also kept their distance. There was something in his eyes, calm, but distant. Like he was already halfway home, sitting on that porch again, watching the wheat sway in the wind. What nobody knew was that this young sniper was about to face a mission unlike any before. One that would test everything he'd learned, every ounce of patience and instinct he had. A mission that would push him beyond the edge of exhaustion, deep into enemy territory, where even the jungle seemed to turn against him. And it all started with one sound, a whispered order, given at dawn, under a fading sky. The mission was simple on paper. Eliminate a high-ranking Japanese intelligence officer believed to be coordinating counterattacks from a hidden outpost deep inside the jungle. But for the young sniper, this wasn't just another shot. This was a hunt. The target was one of the best protected men in the region, guarded by soldiers who had learned to move and fight in silence. The jungle ahead wasn't just dangerous. It was alive with traps, patrols, and the constant hum of unseen eyes. He began his crawl before dawn, his uniform dark with mud, his face painted with ash. The rain had been falling all night, thick and relentless, turning the ground into a maze of puddles and roots. He moved inch by inch, using every trick he'd learned as a hunter, letting the rhythm of the rain cover his sound, pausing whenever birds went quiet, reading the air for movement. The jungle spoke a language most men never understood. But he did. It was the same silence he'd learned back home, waiting for a deer to step out into the open. The same patience, the same stillness. Hours passed. His stomach growled. The humidity clung to his rifle like a living thing. And then, through the leaves, he saw them. A cluster of officers under a bamboo shelter, maps spread out, voices low. One of them, wearing a white scarf, stood out immediately. His movements were sharp, controlled. The way he gave orders, the way others stepped aside. That was the man. The sniper steadied his breath. His heartbeat slowed. The rain softened to a drizzle. He adjusted the scope, waited for the wind to settle, and squeezed the trigger. The sound cracked through the jungle. Sharp, clean, final. The man with the scarf fell backward, the map fluttering into the mud. Panic followed. Soldiers shouted, scattering into the trees, firing blindly into the green. But by the time they aimed in his direction, he was already gone, swallowed by the earth. For the next few weeks, he became more than a sniper. He was a ghost story. Japanese troops refused to stand in the open, refused to light fires, even avoided wearing insignia. They didn't know where he would strike next. American commanders began using his reputation as a weapon, spreading rumors through intercepted radio chatter, planting false reports of the farmer's next target. Fear became a silent ally, but behind that legend, the man was unraveling slowly. Sleep was rare. His trigger finger cramped from hours of holding still. Mosquito bites covered his arms. Leeches crawled inside his boots. The jungle was eating him alive, but he refused to stop. Every time he thought of quitting, he remembered home, his father's words about finishing what you start. So, he pushed on, one mission at a time, one shot at a time. One night, His commanding officer found him sitting alone, cleaning his rifle in the dim glow of a lantern. The man looked at him and asked, "How do you do it? How do you keep hitting them like that?" The sniper just shrugged. "They move like deer," he said quietly. "You just wait for them to make the wrong step." That line would later become famous among the troops, a kind of dark poetry whispered among patrols. It captured what made him different. He didn't see himself as a killer. He saw himself as a hunter, waiting for the inevitable moment when his target's pride or carelessness would expose them. He wasn't faster than the enemy, just more patient. By the end of that month, the confirmed count was 31 officers, each one verified by scouts or ground teams that followed in his path. The effect was immediate. The Japanese command structure in that region began to crumble. Orders were lost, confusion spread, and American forces advanced more freely than they had in weeks. His rifle and his discipline had changed the flow of battle without a single direct assault. There's an interesting fact most people don't know. The rifle he used wasn't some specially built sniper weapon from the factory. It was a modified Springfield .03, one he personally tuned for smoother bolt action and adjusted scope alignment using nothing but a screwdriver and patience. The same hands that once fixed fences and carved wood now tuned a weapon so precisely that it became an extension of his own senses. He cared for it like a living thing. Each night, he would strip it down, clean every inch, and whisper under his breath, "Not a prayer, but a ritual," as if apologizing to it for what it had to do the next day. The Army tried to promote him, but he refused any spotlight. He didn't want newspapers or medals. He said they should save those for the men who fought in the open, who took bullets in daylight. "I just do my job," he told a journalist who managed to catch him during a rare break. That line became part of his quiet legend, a symbol of the men who fought in shadows, whose victories were never celebrated with parades. Even the Japanese recognized him in their reports. Intelligence documents recovered later described an invisible marksman whose shots came from nowhere and whose presence caused unease among officers. One report even advised commanders not to linger in open command positions, a rare acknowledgement that fear itself had become part of the war. For one man's rifle to affect enemy behavior at that scale, that was something extraordinary. Yet, despite all the myths that grew around him, he wasn't a cold killer. In one of his last letters home, he wrote something that revealed the truth behind the legend. "It's strange," he wrote. "Out here, every shot feels like two. One for them, one through me." It was a simple line, but it spoke volumes. Beneath the calm and skill was still a human heart, burdened but steady. As the campaign in the Philippines neared its end, orders came down to rotate him out. His commanders believed he had done enough, more than enough. But he didn't see it that way. He wasn't finished. There was one last mission waiting for him, one that would test every instinct, every lesson, every ounce of strength he had left. The jungle, once his ally, would turn against him. And this time, the hunter would become the hunted. The order came at dawn. A Japanese counterforce had been spotted moving through the eastern ridge, regrouping under a surviving officer who'd sworn to track down the mysterious American sniper. They called him the Silent Ghost, and the mission was clear: end the legend. For the farm kid turned marksman, it was supposed to be another operation, another hidden ridge, another careful shot. But deep down, something felt different. The air was heavier. The birds were quiet. The jungle seemed to be holding its breath. He packed light, just his rifle, canteen, a few rounds, and a photograph of home folded inside his shirt pocket. The face in that photo wasn't smiling. It was his father, standing by the barn, hand on a fence post, the same fence he'd mended as a boy. It reminded him who he was and why he fought the way he did. Quietly, precisely, with purpose. By midday, he was already in position, belly down in the mud, eyes scanning through the scope. The ridge below was crawling with soldiers. But this time, something was off. The movements were too careful, too controlled. Then he realized it was a trap. They weren't moving to attack. They were waiting. For him, he shifted slightly, trying to retreat without sound. But the jungle betrayed him. A twig snapped. Instantly, gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the leaves, dirt exploding around him. For the first time, he wasn't the ghost. He was the prey. He rolled, crawled, slid into a shallow ditch, mud filling his sleeves. Adrenaline pounded through his chest. He fired once, twice, short bursts, enough to scatter their focus. The echo bounced through the trees, confusing the enemy. He used that moment to vanish deeper into the brush, moving low and fast. For 2 days, the hunt continued. The Japanese forces combed every inch of the jungle, using smoke grenades, bayonets, and dogs. He moved only at night, sleeping under roots, drinking rainwater, listening to the faint sound of distant shouting. His body was bruised, his clothes torn, but his will unbroken. The same stubborn grit that had made him a legend now kept him alive. On the third morning, exhausted and starving, he found himself at the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley below. Through his scope, he saw the officer leading the search, the man who had promised to kill the American ghost. Surrounded by guards, shouting orders, confident that his trap had worked. The sniper adjusted his scope one last time. His hands were shaking, but his focus was sharp as ever. He steadied his breath, whispered something only the wind could hear, and pulled the trigger. One shot, just one. The officer fell before anyone understood what happened. Silence. Then chaos. Soldiers scattered, shouting in confusion. But the sniper didn't stay to watch. He knew this was his last, the final shot of a month-long ghost story. He turned away, slipping back into the jungle, moving with the same calm patience that had defined him from the start. When the American forces found him days later, he was sitting by a riverbank, rifle across his knees, staring at the water. Thin, pale, eyes hollow, but alive. They carried him back to camp, and for the first time, he spoke about what he had done. Not with pride, but with quiet clarity. "It's not the killing," he said. "It's the waiting that changes you." After the war, he didn't return as a hero. There were no parades, no medals pinned in grand ceremonies. He went home to the same farm, the same land he'd left behind. He plowed the fields again, fixed the fences, and lived out his days far from the noise of the world. Neighbors would see him sitting on his porch at dusk, the old rifle resting beside him, eyes fixed on the horizon. If anyone asked about the war, he'd just smile faintly and say, "I did my part." Nothing more. Years later, when his service records were finally declassified, historians were stunned. In just 1 month of active combat operations, he had confirmed 31 enemy officer kills, a record that stood among the highest in the Pacific. Yet there were no photos, no interviews, no famous memoirs, just a handful of reports, a few faded letters, and a legacy carried quietly by those who had served alongside him. One of his former comrades wrote, "He was the calmest man I ever met. Out there, in the middle of hell, he made the world slow down." That was his real gift, not just his aim, but his patience, his understanding of silence. He had taken the discipline of a farm life and turned it into a weapon the enemy could never understand. In the end, his story wasn't about how many he killed. It was about how one ordinary man, with no fame, no rank, and no thirst for glory, used the skills of his simple life to alter the course of a war. He proved that greatness doesn't always roar from the sky or charge across battlefields. Sometimes it crawls quietly through the mud, breath steady, heart calm, eyes fixed on what must be done. He died years later, peacefully, in his sleep. They buried him near his family farm, the same soil where his story began. On his headstone, there were no mentions of medals or ranks, just his name and one simple line engraved by his family. He waited. He watched. He never missed. And somewhere, in the silence of a field at dusk, you can almost imagine him still, steady, patient, and watching.